Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Datavail, Monte Carlo, and Quest. I'm Stephen Fagg, Director at Database Trends and Applications and Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled The Role of the DBA in 2023, Changes, Challenges, and Opportunities. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible today, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response. Plus, all viewers today will be entered for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for participating. Now, to introduce our speakers for today, we have Eric Russo, Senior Vice President of Database Services at Datavail, Scott O'Leary, Solutions Engineer at Monte Carlo, and Julie Hyman, Product Management Director at Quest. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Eric to get us started. Welcome to the broadcast, Eric.
Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to talk about some of the changes that challenges and opportunities DBAs are facing in 2023. Just introduce myself a little bit. I'm the leader of database services at Datavail. I have 20 years of industry experience in databases, and I live in Denver, Colorado. A little bit about how Datavail helps our customers. We leverage our core competencies. Databases is one of them. We're one of the largest, if not largest, database providers in North America. Our data management and analytics practice helps our customers through providing BI reporting, transformation, integration support. And our applications division helps design Microsoft custom solutions and also supports all Oracle application, PeopleSoft, and JD Edwards applications. And we do this while supporting our customers on premises and the cloud. And we can also help migrate your company into the cloud or from one database platform or to another. We have 17 years plus experience in database services, 9 years in cloud experience, over 100 cloud SAs and engineers. And through this, we support over 700 customers and many databases. We performed over 250 cloud migrations. And we support customers through project services, operational managed services, and data development services. So running project services, we could do health checks, upgrades, migrations. The operational support is a large part of what we do with a 24/7 support of our customers through monitoring, incident support, service requests, among like all different aspects of data and proactive services. And our data development services cover everything you see down there, like development, tuning, automation, data warehouse, etc. So our agenda today would be kind of focusing on talking about database challenges, evolution of the cloud, evolution and DBA role with the cloud, and what does the DBA of the future look like? So some of the database challenges today facing DBAs, one is agility and innovation. Setting up on-premises database installations can take a lot of time and planning. You need to get your server provisioned and disattached, which requires coordinating with other teams. Installing the database software can take a lot of time as well. So this takes up a lot of time to achieve this. So now with the cloud, you have the ability to choose from a list of images and provision quickly. So with the cloud, we're getting faster at doing this. Also, if you do not have a mature development pipeline, deploying new code can be painful, but cloud tools can help with streamlining this and help you create a more mature process. Cost and efficiency. Many DBAs are getting pressure to help reduce the cost and complexity of these systems. One example is that of database sprawl. Database sprawl can get out of control, which leads to lengthy consolidation projects that take your time from other strategic priorities and more exciting projects that you want to work on. And reliability, we are all faced with SLAs from different groups in our companies. Large environments provide challenges on knowing how to solve each issue. On-premises HA and DR setups are needed, but also expensive and time-consuming to provision all of the hardware for multiple data centers and a disaster recovery setup. Scalability. In the past, we did not have the ability to scale up and down at will. An unexpected increase in database activity would cause slowdowns for applications and make us all sit on P1 calls, while the company could possibly be losing revenue. The advent of the cloud has provided us with new tools to scale up resources during busy times. One example is a retail database during Black Friday sales. We can scale up resources during the times we know we'll be busy, then scale back down to the correct resource levels when traffic is back to normal. And security is more important more than ever for DBAs, and we are facing increased security challenges and controls. DBAs need to be more knowledgeable on how to prevent unauthorized access. Securing and encrypting data has become a large part of a DBA's job. So the evolution of cloud and databases. We all know that the cloud is here, and for most of DBAs, our future. We see a few different cloud approaches in the industry. We see hybrid cloud, which is, you have some on-premises, some of your databases on-premises, some in the cloud. We also see multi-cloud approaches. Some companies don't want to get locked into one cloud, so they split workloads between multiple cloud providers so that they have the ability to maneuver between 2 different clouds or 3, maybe even 3. Even some DR setups are between 2 different clouds. IaaS versus PaaS versus DBaaS. You get many choices between how you want to have your databases in the cloud. You can obtain a dedicated bare metal server and install everything yourself and have ultimate control. Or you can think about PaaS and choose to build from images and pre-installations from a cloud provider's compute platform. This can be handy when you're doing lift and shifts as a first step into the cloud. Then there is DBaaS, Database as a Service, where you can pick from your cloud provider's flavor of multiple databases. Administration time is less for DBaaS, and you get advanced features that you can tap into, like multiple read replicas and high availability options. In recent years, cloud providers in the industry have started to present us with more options for database engines. These new diverse architectures have made it possible to do more with our data than ever. In the last few years, we have even seen purpose-built databases such as time series and graph become more popular. Database containers. Containers have revolutionized the way that we deploy applications and databases. DBAs are now challenged with learning how to work with containers so that they are able to become part of the DevOps process. And of course, one that we're hearing a lot about, the push to move to open source databases. So those of us from the Oracle and SQL servers of the world know that we're hearing more and more questions from leaders on migrating to these databases such as MySQL and Postgres that are becoming increasingly popular. Many DBAs that are used to legacy databases are being asked to learn Postgres and MySQL and start thinking about migrating workloads from other DBMSs. So what does the evolution of the DBA roles to the cloud look like? Well, it's a little bit of going from reactive DBA to the strategic DBA. The reactive DBA is kind of the DBA of the old, where you're operational, you're keeping the lights on, you're managing things like making sure the disk space is good on the server, resources are not being overutilized, you're focused on alert responses, and you're kind of managing things within the hardware limits of your servers. The strategic DBA, which we're starting to see more of in the cloud world, they're more like consultants, architectural consultants, developing schemas, etc. Growth focused on both your career and the business goals. Participating in design architectural discussions, being at the table with the application developers. Focusing on cloud migration strategies and approach, figuring out how and why you're going to architect the systems the way you are going to in the cloud. Automating a lot of routine tasks so that they don't take up your time and you can focus on strategic initiatives. And spending time to prepare for new technologies and challenges. So what does the DBA of the future look like? Well, they should be able to work in multiple cloud platforms. Your current company may have only one cloud, or they may have multiple, which would cause you need to be able to work in multiple clouds. But if you move positions to another company, it is very likely you'll have to learn another cloud platform. The DBA of the future adds the following to their skill sets: provisioning cloud databases, understanding more infrastructure related tasks, setting things up like VPCs, etc., things that we have not done in the past. More focused on architecture, tuning, and security, those high value tasks. Working in agile DevOps teams, and learning to work in containers and how to manage containers. The DBA of the future obtains and maintains certifications to stay competitive in the market, focuses on their companies or their customers' goals and helps to obtain them using cloud native tools, and is flexible enough to learn and move to the next cloud innovation. So we all know that every cloud platform has new features coming out almost monthly, and most definitely yearly. There's many major features released. So being able to stay ahead on that, and um, increasing your skills. So what are some opportunities that DBAs have right now? Working to align your goals with your business. What are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to achieve with their database environment and with their data? Also aligning your goals with your future career. Are you doing the things that are going to make you valuable in the market years from now? Training and developing your skills, keeping up with the pace of new changes, and mastering the cloud. It's definitely worth it to get knowledgeable on all the cloud platforms and train yourself in them. Also, one that many people might not think of is diversifying database platforms. You may be asked to work on more than one platform, where in the past, like if you're an Oracle DBA, you might be asked to work on Postgres now as well. Or if you're a SQL Server DBA, you might be asked to work on a NoSQL engine, like Cassandra or MongoDB. So what can a current DBA do to help future-proof their career? Well, there's many different areas in the database industry for our careers. You could think about becoming a data architect and becoming a data engineer, learn analytics, BI reporting, become a data scientist. A really hot position right now is a database migration specialist. Many companies are looking to migrate into the cloud. And also another one is a database security specialist. As we all know, many organizations are faced with increased security threats. And you can expand all these skills with cloud certifications and staying up on your knowledge. So in order to obtain all these goals, make yourself strategic in your company, and also give yourself time to learn. You could consider forming a partnership with a managed service provider who can take many of the mundane tasks off your hands and also help you with your strategic plans in the cloud. So that's the end of my presentation. Appreciate your time. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Eric. Okay, at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Scott O'Leary, Solutions Engineer at Monte Carlo. Welcome to the broadcast, Scott.
Stephen. We'll dive right into it here. I'm Scott from Monte Carlo. I'm going to talk to you today about building more reliable data systems. So really quick introduction. I'm a solutions engineering lead here at Monte Carlo. I've been with the company since we started, since we publicly launched the product about 3 years ago. And I've spent my whole career in data, working in ad tech and martech before I made my way over to Monte Carlo to work on data reliability. In terms of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be talking about what data downtime even is. Then we're going to talk about how companies can build data trust and ultimately increase adoption of data. And then we'll finish off with the key pillars to help teams actually tackle data reliability in a scalable way. So first, what is data downtime? Seems like the best way to explain pretty much anything these days is with memes. So this one here by Casey Green illustrates the problem pretty well. The fact of the matter is that data teams deal with data downtime constantly, whether it's data quality issues, whether it's data availability issues, whether it's issues just interacting with the data at the presentation layer. Data teams deal with this all day and all night. And I'm sure if we were able to ask for a show of hands here, most of you would be able to raise your hand and say, hey, I've dealt with data quality issues before. And from our research and from external research, we've learned over the past couple of years that up to half of data engineering time is spent on data quality issues, whether that is trying to define like tests and checks to catch data quality issues, or investigating and resolving those kinds of data quality issues once they do arise. And it gets even worse for data scientists and analytics folks, the folks who are actually responsible for delivering insights to the business. They spend up to 80% of their time ensuring that the data that they're using or that they want to use is accurate and up to date, so that they don't ship potentially bad or erroneous metrics or dashboards or whatever it might be. And so why is this? Why do we have this problem? Because traditional approaches to data quality is inherently reactive. And what we mean by that is teams who have thought about and invested in data quality in the past, they've typically gone out and wrote a bunch of explicit and manual tests and checks at various parts of their data pipelines, which is great. It's definitely better than not having anything. But it really comes down to being a scale issue. It's really difficult, if not impossible, to define, deploy, and execute and maintain tests and checks everywhere data can break. And so the unfortunate reality is that most data issues, and from our research, about 90% of data issues across organizations, are actually identified by those downstream consumers. So by those data scientists or by those analysts building dashboards, or in the worst cases, by the leaders and executives using those dashboards to make strategic decisions within their organizations. And not only that, sometimes it takes days or weeks or even months for somebody to identify that there's even an issue in the first place. So that bad data can be used for a long period of time before it's even identified as being potentially bad. And the business impact of that, there's a lot of good external research. This one's from Experian, actually, that the negative impact that bad data has on businesses is a 12 to 27% impact on actual revenue. So not just on time spent or resources used, but this actually impacts revenue directly, because organizations are data driven in the year 2023. So using bad data to make decisions can clearly cause some issues related to revenue that actually impact the business. And so when we set out to help companies solve this data quality issue at scale, what we realized is that it's not necessarily a people issue, it's not necessarily a technology issue, it's actually a bit of both of those, as well as a lot of process type issues. And what you can see here is that this illustrates some of those process issues. You have data producers that sit upstream, whether those are folks in your organization or external vendors that provide you data. They don't understand how that data is being used downstream, so they aren't able to control for those cases where that data might be wrong or bad getting into those downstream systems. Once it does get into the data environment that the data engineering and analytics and data science team uses, the data engineers that manage those pipelines, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to predict all the ways that data can and will break. So it's really difficult to understand what types of tests you need to write where, how to write them, how to scale them, et cetera. And then at the end of the line, you have your data consumers who don't really have an ability to identify data quality issues besides when their dashboards are totally broken or when a metric or KPI is just way off based on what they know about the business processes that feed that particular KPI. So all of this kind of interaction and these relationships, each kind of point along these processes introduces risk and points of failure in data pipelines. And so when we started talking to data teams about these data quality problems that they were having, we actually learned that data downtime, like the data quality issues that cause data downtime, are actually very similar across all companies that we talk to. So no matter what industry they were in, no matter what types of systems they were using for their data, no matter what types of data products or dashboards they were building, a lot of the data quality issues were common. And you can see a few of the most common questions there, starting with the basic, like, is this data even up to date? Does the size look okay based on what we understand about the upstream processes that create this data? Are there particular values that might be unexpectedly higher or lower? So all of these types of data quality type questions came up in those early conversations. So this is when, once we realized this, that's when we introduced the concept of data observability into the world. So what is data observability? Really simply put, data observability speaks to an organization's ability to proactively identify and understand and resolve data quality issues before they impact the business, really looking at overall data health across the organization. So our approach to data quality took all of those common data quality type questions that we heard from hundreds of different data teams across all different industries, and we distilled all of that feedback down into these 5 pillars of data observability. So I'm going to walk through each one of these individually, but we see that these all come together, and if a company has a pulse on each of these pillars, then they have a pretty good understanding of whether or not their data is reliable. So starting with data freshness, this is probably the simplest one. This is just understanding whether or not a particular data asset is up to date. So has it been updated in a reasonable time frame when you expected it to have been updated, whether that asset gets updated on an hourly basis or a daily basis or a weekly basis. You need to understand and be able to track and track every update and be able to identify those cases where a table hasn't been updated when it was supposed to be. The second pillar looks at data volumes. So this looks at, for us anyway, looks at both like row counts over time as well as byte counts over time for all of those important assets in the data environment. And this helps companies identify in a really scalable way whether their data is complete, whether there might be a potential duplication issue, whether there might be missing data, and this also helps identify those silent failures where your all of your orchestration tooling and the database itself all ran and are running successfully. You're getting 200 OK back from all of your processing jobs, but nothing actually changes in that target table when it was supposed to. So no records added or removed or updated. So most basic monitoring that folks have on their processing layer will miss that type of issue where nothing actually changes when it was supposed to. The next piece here is data quality, and we define data quality as like the actual making sure that the actual content of the data is correct. So looking into the field level distribution and understanding those common data quality metrics and statistics like null rates and zero rates and uniqueness, mean, standard deviation, percentile ranges, all of those types of common metrics and statistics that, again, every data team wants to be able to keep an eye on and understand when things change significantly. Monitoring the data quality itself ensures that teams are able to proactively identify cases where, for example, a null rate spikes unexpectedly for a field, or a uniqueness constraint is all of a sudden broken because we're seeing duplicates in an ID field or something like that. The next one here is looking at schema. So Monte Carlo, we primarily deal with structured data, so understanding any schema changes, whether that's a table name change or a field type change or a field being removed. Staying on top of those types of schema changes is incredibly important because they have the potential to break downstream models and dashboards and things like that. And then the last piece is lineage. And lineage isn't something that we actually monitor at Monte Carlo, but it is incredibly important and useful to help expedite issue investigation and resolution, because it gives the data team, so the engineers are typically the ones looking at these types of issues, it gives them immediate context as to where data comes from, how it's being generated, where it's being used downstream, how it's being used downstream, and ultimately helps them triage both on the investigation process, where to look first, but also on based on the actual impact to the business that any kind of data issue might cause. And so how all this comes together at Monte Carlo, we built this, the first data observability platform. It's been out in the wild for about 3 years now. We cover most of the most popular kind of components of the modern data stack. We believe that the data observability needs to be end-to-end to be able to look at all of those potential places where data might break, whether that's at the data lake layer, the data warehouse layer, whether there's issues related to the orchestration or processing tooling, or whether those issues are federating downstream into the business intelligence, analytics, or data science type layer as well. And of course, this all comes with proactive notifications that go out to the tools that these data teams are actually using. And that just about wraps it up. I know I'm at time here, so I will wrap it up with a thank you so much for everybody's time. And one shameless plug, we actually did write a book on data quality called Data Quality Fundamentals. Highly recommend you go out and get that. You can see it on our website there. It's also available on Amazon and through O'Reilly directly. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Scott. Okay, I'd like to introduce our final speaker for today, Julie Hyman, Product Management Director at Quest. Welcome to the broadcast, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I came after two great colleagues here. I loved all the things you said, and I think I'm just going to add on to some of the things that you brought up. So hopefully that will round out our conversation. First, let me introduce myself, Julie Hyman. I joined Quest back in 2010, so I've been 12, 13 years in this particular area. I started off working in the Toad. If you're familiar with Toad tools, that's where I start working in this tool set and working with this company. And Toad is a DBA tool, right? Toad is Toad for Oracle is built its name on database developers and DBAs, and all the other tools in the portfolio that I manage are dealing with these same personas or just adjacent, right? So developers, data analysts, DBAs. The tool sets that I work with and are familiar with are Toad and Foglight and SharePlex, our replication tool, Apex SQL, Spotlight, Benchmark, a bunch of tools within this data operations portfolio. So I mention all this because I want you to know that we have a deep understanding of this persona, of this job and this title and these tasks. And so what I'm going to talk about is what I've seen change in my tenure here, in the last 10, 12 years. And I always like to start off with this quote, is that there is a myth out there of the disappearing DBA, right? As things are moving to cloud, things are moving to autonomous. There's this, you can even just Google disappearing DBA. You'll see a bunch of hits out there on different articles written. But it is true what this quote says. DBAs are the guardians of the data kingdom, and that's how they have to view themselves. They're charged with the critical task of ensuring that data is available, reliable, and secure. And their expertise and their dedication are the backbone of any data-driven organization. I really think that's how DBAs need to start seeing themselves, and we'll kind of go through that as we go through my deck here. Okay, so let's cover the major trends that impact the DBA. None of these are going to be new to you, right? The first is the opportunities that cloud has brought to us, right? When we talk about cloud, both the, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, database as a service, we have to remember why folks are migrating to the cloud. What is it doing for the business? Why are we being driven here, right? And it's cost savings, it's scalability and flexibility, it's accessibility, right? All of those different opportunities that the cloud brings forward are just too tempting to pass up, especially when, when you're coming from a world where you have these large monolithic, relational database platform vendors like Oracle that are really eating up not only time and effort within an organization, but licensing costs, right? When all of a sudden there's new opportunities to get away from the hardware management, to also get into some open source database sources that and relieve your budget from paying for those deeper licensing costs, or just pay for what you need and also be able to expand easily. It's just too much of an opportunity for businesses to pass up. And so we've seen that. We've been talking about cloud forever, but today I was looking at a stat where it's now equal with on-prem databases. So the adoption, we're past all of the hype cycle into severe adoption. And we see every customer that we deal with today is lift and shifting to the cloud, migrating to the cloud, including changing, from Oracle to Postgres, Oracle to Snowflake, et cetera. So that is the biggest impact, but it has another impact too. And all of these trends that I'm going to talk about here are related, right? They all drive one another. And so with all of these rise of databases, with the rise of data out there and the ability to capture it, monitor it, it's the desire for businesses to be data-driven, right? So with increased competition, the availability of data I mentioned, the cost savings, improved decision-making, companies are realizing more and more that what their key to their success is their data, even more so than their services or their product. If they can get a handle on their data, if they can understand their customer, if they can understand their customer's journey, they're going to be much more successful than their competitors in the market. So this is what executives are striving for. So that top-down push is to be data-driven. And that push is focusing a demand for data democracy within the organization. All right, so our executives want us to be data-driven. They're doing a culture shift within the organization. How does that impact each and every user? And what it means is that data has to move out from behind sort of the firewall of just being owned by IT, and all of the business stakeholders want access to the data and want to be able to base their business decisions on it. So, we saw this with the rise of Tableau in the early 2000s. That ability to put data and data tools directly into business users' hands meant that the business felt empowered with the data. And since that point, there's just been this rise of need throughout an organization, or demand, that data be open, it be accessible, it be of good quality, it be ready to be analyzed. Okay, so we've got opportunities in the cloud. We need to be data driven. Everyone in the organization needs to be empowered with data. Boom. But there's also this huge mandate for governance. And governance means a wide variety of things, right? I mean, there's been major breaches, certainly. So it's the security around data, right? 2018, Uber had a huge breach in their database. In 2019, Capital One, I think they had their database just sitting unprotected in an S3 environment on Amazon, and they got burned for that. Microsoft themselves through Azure. So there's certainly protecting your data in the cloud, but there's also making sure your data is of high quality. Some of the stuff that Scott was talking about the importance of data quality in an organization. If you're talking about people having direct access to the data and making business decisions based on that, you better make sure that that data is high quality and ready for analysis. So all four of these things are impacting directly the DBA, and you can see how they're related to each other as well. Okay, so how is the role changed? Very much, as Eric brought up, right? He talked about it going from reactive to strategic. I talk about it going from tactical to strategic, same thing, right? So back in 2010, when we look at the surveys and how our DBAs were working through their challenges and their role, they were focused on on-prem relational, right? I say here they worked closely with application developers and infrastructure teams. To be perfectly honest, there was always complaints about developers just throwing things over the wall to the DBAs and the DBAs having to optimize. It was not a close relationship, right, between developers and those teams, not for the most part, not unless you were lucky. There was an emphasis on monitoring, tuning, optimizing. Those are still important things, but the emphasis was a lot of time very reactive, as Eric mentioned. Something's wrong, now we need to optimize it, or that we're running out of resources, we need to optimize it or tune it. Not a lot of strategic thinking yet. They were responsible for managing database security, but when we were talking then, and we're talking about backup and recovery and troubleshooting, it wasn't the kind of security questions we have now. Technical skills they needed as well, mostly on-premise, and you could live just knowing SQL Server and Oracle. Okay. What we see today is a massive shift, right? So it's focused on on-prem, cloud, relational, non-relational, database as a service, technical skills, right? Totally changing into managing cloud databases and knowing those cloud platforms as well. No longer are you working side by side even with DevOps. You are embedded in a DevOps team. So you're not just, you're not just have a good relationship with your developers. You are part of the same team. And then all the tasks that you still need to do as sort of normal everyday management tasks, those need to be automated, right? And a focus less on monitoring and more on observability, right? Your data security governance whole environment has changed. It's much more complex and dynamic. And you need to be familiar with everything, right? There's no more getting away with not knowing databases, right? Databases as they're coming up are things that you need to know. So I'm going to just rush a little bit through this because I want to get to a few other things here. But if you look at the top tasks that we saw in 2010, again, it's the things I mentioned. It's maintenance and backup and recovery, patching and upgrades, and security management, meaning user account and permission work. All of that has changed. All of those are very tactical or reactionary kinds of tasks. And now it's much more strategic, right? Cloud migration and management and automation and DevOps and security and governance, not just user access and permissions on the databases that you're managing. Okay, so what you need to think about now is that it is a true data team in your organization, right? And so as a DBA, you are a player on that team. And as a player, you need to bring value and expertise to your areas as well. But if you look at these different personas, and I could have mentioned more here, for example, I didn't even mention like scalability engineers or anything like that. But if you look at, for example, the data engineer, the DBA is expected to grow. This is a Business Labor Statistics Bureau of Labor Statistics stats, 8% between the next, let's say, 10 years. That data engineer, 50% year-over-year growth is expected, right? Data engineer is traditionally or is seen as owning the pipelines of data. Data scientist, 35% growth, and the IS security analyst, 35% growth. So these other team members, they're growing on your team. They're coming onto the team. So a DBA to really participate in this really needs to up their game and bring value to the team by being the database expert, right? And so the kind of new skills that the DBA needs to be thinking about and proficient in is definitely cloud computing and database as a service. Those are almost table stakes now, right? Understanding database as a service, understanding those cloud environments, how to optimize them, how to manage them, that's crucial to any DBA's career today. In addition, automation. All those tasks that DBAs traditionally did, a lot of them they still need to do, but they need to automate it so they're not spending all of their time there. Data security, this is an area that everybody relies on the DBAs, or the DBA can actually bring a lot of expertise to this environment. If they don't think about themselves as managing data structures, but managing data as well. So knowing the compliance side of it, understanding HIPAA, understanding GDPR, understanding California regulations as well, they can really contribute to that conversation. And then DevOps. I was involved with DevOps when it was just a developer and an operations collaboration, but not necessarily involving the DBA. The DBA was still doing everything by hand and became the bottleneck in DevOps pipelines. can't be that way anymore. The DBA has to be an active participant, an active player in DevOps, so that all those changes can be rolled out and the database doesn't become the bottleneck. And then lastly, as we move data, as we see more and more data move to the cloud, I will say that 70% of the organizations we deal with, they're really still dealing with relational databases in the cloud. But that's not going to last for long. There is so much that can be done with NoSQL, with data lakes, that takes a lot of planning, maybe not on the ingestion of data, but definitely on the consumption of data from those environments. So the more the DBA can become an expert in those technologies and offer them to their company as options, as the company wants to grow their data profile, the more value they're going to bring to their organization. Okay, and then lastly, as a vendor, I want to offer what I think you should be looking for when you're looking for applications, solutions, and tooling, right? So what does a vendor need in order to qualify to be someone on your list that's interesting, and that's moving the way that you want to move in your career, or your company wants to move toward their goals? So first, I think cross-platform, right? We rarely deal with anybody that's sort of full stack Oracle anymore, or full stack SQL Server. So every tooling that you're looking for, every vendor that you're looking for should have expertise, should have tools that go across platforms. I think Scott did an excellent job of showing how his data observability tools work all cross platforms, no matter where your data is. And that's what you should be looking for in all of your vendors. Next one is observability as well. You want to talk with folks who are talking about that new way of looking across your full stack, all of your environment, to understand what's happening, and not just monitoring one or two sources, right? If you've got a cloud monitoring, it's just monitoring the things you have in that cloud. It's not good enough. You need to look for somebody who's building toward full observability. You need to make sure that everybody you're working with is secure, is supporting you and your security goals, but is also secure themselves. I think we all know of the SolarWinds breach, right, where it was a third party that's supply chain software inside their software that left them vulnerable. You need to make sure that all your vendors are practicing secure software development lifecycle. And lastly, AI. There are so many opportunities with natural language processing and predictive analytics and machine learning to help a DBA see things before they happen, right? Or not have to know the ins and outs of a particular SQL, but can just ask in natural language questions of your data. This empowers your DBAs. It also empowers your end users. And so you should be asking your vendors what they're doing around this and how they're seeing their applications grow with this kind of technology, because it is available. And with that, that is it. If there's any questions or anything, or comments or anything, you can always reach out to me. My email's up here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Julie. We are going to dive into questions from our viewers. I've seen a lot of them come in. Eric, we're going to start with you. Do you see a skills shortage in the database world? Are teams basically being asked to do more with less staff at this point?
Across our customers, I do see a shortage of talent, especially around areas of migrating from one platform to another, and also supporting those open source databases, and actually NoSQL as well. There's a big shortage there.
Understood. Scott, Julie, would either of you like to weigh in on that as well? Is that what you're seeing? Are you seeing skills shortages in any other adjacent areas? Scott, I guess we could start with you.
Okay, well, I can certainly jump in here. Certainly the first part, right? Are people being asked to do more with less? Absolutely, right? I mean, I think that's just IT budgets are being, constantly cut, and that's been happening for a long time. As far as skill shortage, I do see the folks who understand open source databases, who are comfortable with cloud technology or NoSQL, their status is really being elevated within the groups that I talk to. So when I'm talking to a group, an IT group, and they're talking about their plans, those DBAs in particular who understand those platforms, those are really folks who are owning and driving the conversation. And so I certainly think that there are, we could use more of it out there, and the DBAs are doing themselves a great service by investing time and learning those technologies, even if their company hasn't even put that in front of them yet, to have it in their back pocket when it does come up, because it will come up.
Understood. Thanks, Julie. Okay, we had another question come up here. Is data engineer DevOps, do they have the upper hand over the DBA in the cloud environment? We have someone on with us that feels that is the case. Julie, what are your thoughts on that? And then Eric, I'd like to go to you as well. And I think Scott's back too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the DBA, the DBA has been around longer than some of these other personas, right? DevOps and the data engineer. And so it could look like they have a leg up because you're seeing them introduced to the scene. You're seeing those growth in titles that I mentioned. There are more of them sort of coming on board. But I think the DBAs have, with the right approach and the right strategic mindset, they do have sort of the gravitas of having been within an organization that they can play right next to those personas as well. But it's all about how you approach it, right? If you approach it as a threat to what you're doing or as something that's dragging you into this new space, yeah, I think that you're going to see them gain, for lack of a better way to say it, the upper hand. But if you approach them as an enthusiastic team member that has knowledge of these different areas, I think you're going to see like that collaborative data team really drive you forward as well as drive them.
Understood. Scott, would love to get your thoughts on this. The question is are data engineers, DevOps having the upper hand over DBAs in cloud environments? And there was actually a follow-up question on this. Is data engineer, is transitioning to a data engineer a good option for cloud DBAs at this point?
Yeah, great question, Stephen. And so we primarily work with the data engineering folks from like our engagements with Monte Carlo customers and prospects. But I will say that, so I don't necessarily think I can say whether one or the other has the upper hand because we don't work with too many DBAs these days. That being said, at the larger organizations that we do work with, we do work a lot with folks that have like titles like cloud data architect or data infrastructure lead, things like that. And a lot of those folks are former DBAs who have, like Julie kind of mentioned, moved into some of these kind of more like cloud-centric type roles and are really effective because they do have that institutional knowledge. They do understand how things used to work. They understand where things are going. So they've been, a lot of the folks that I work with in particular, especially on like the deployments and getting all the integrations spun up, those types of folks who have the DBA background are really, really effective in running these deployments and enabling the data engineering teams to get everything that they need and make sure everything's working properly.
Understood. That's a great point, Scott. Eric, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yep, it's along the lines of Scott and Julie. I think if you're straight down the plate DBA and you're not updating your skill sets and getting involved in more, strategic things and going into architecture, engineering, et cetera, then maybe in that view of things, maybe the DevOps DBA has a little bit of an upper hand, or maybe or they have a better career choices in the future. But I think if the DBA is on top of their skill sets and training and certifications, they should be just fine.
Understood. Julie, I have another question. I'm going to start with you, and I'm glad someone asked this. What differentiates a DBA and a data engineer on a team? I think that's it's important for us to establish this.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the data engineer classically, right, is described as that they're in charge of data pipelines, right? How data moves through an organization, the quality and the accessibility of that data, right? Getting it ready for the data analyst, the data scientist to take it from there and drive decisions from it. I think the DBA traditionally, right, it's a legacy role. It's been around longer than a data engineer, and so it's traditionally been looking at managing a platform which holds data, right, or managing multiple platforms which hold data, right, optimizing those platforms, tuning SQL queries, setting up users and permissions, that kind of thing. And so there is huge opportunity for overlap between the two. And again, especially for a DBA that limits themselves to that sort of legacy definition, right? But for those DBAs that see themselves really as, I forget what the exact words on the quote were, but sort of those data experts, right? There's the strategic data experts in the organization. There's a ton of overlap between those positions. And a data engineer you could even see as a subset of what the DBA is overseeing as a whole. So for me, and I know it's hard because you're working within companies that already have political structures and that already have sort of organizational structures that you might feel are limiting you if you're coming from that legacy DBA role and you're being sort of boxed in. But the more that DBA could align themselves, I think, Eric, you said it well on your slides, to the strategic goals of the company, not to making a certain platform or set of platforms work well, but to the strategic goals of the company and how data, not just data platforms, but how data plays into that, they can elevate their role where they're really on that sort of expertise managerial end of the data and not just relegated to sort of a single role or a single set of boundaries right within their role. Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, really appreciate it, Julie. So, Scott, I'm going to change the subject for a second. Scott, I've got a question for you. Who typically owns data observability?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially in the context of the past couple of questions and answers here. So in our experience, and I will caveat this, that we typically today anyway work more with the kind of cloud native or have already migrated to the cloud type companies. And in those cases, we most like the kind of owners and operators of the data observability platform are typically those data engineers who, like Julie said, are those ones who are actually building pipelines and making sure that the data flowing through those pipelines is accurate and up to date and usable and all of that good stuff. So typically we see the data engineering team take that on, but I will also say that at some of the larger organizations we've started to work with, think like a JetBlue or an Amgen, some of the kind of legacy type companies who have adopted the cloud, we are seeing roles like data operations come in to enable those data engineering teams to execute like their modeling and processing capabilities in support of ensuring that all those operations result in good quality data. So we are seeing at those larger organizations teams not necessarily dedicated just to data quality, but teams who are dedicated to managing the infrastructure, managing the reliability of the infrastructure and things like that. And we'll see that in the form of like a data operations type team that supports the data engineering team.
Understood. Thanks, Scott. Julie, you wanted to weigh in on this one.
Yeah, so the group that I manage over at Quest, we're actually called the Data Operations Set of Tooling, right? And so Foglight is has been around for 10, 12 years, and it's a monitoring tool is what it was typically called. And that's the tool that we're migrating and expanding into observability. So I see it from the other side, where these legacy DBAs who are used to monitoring tools now want to step it up one step higher and see it on an observability layer, right? A lot of the same kinds of use cases, you're just seeing it in a more sort of holistic view, a more visual view of your environment, so you can move a little bit more from reactionary to strategic, And so I see the DBA as absolutely playing in observability because they've been doing it on the monitoring level, and it's just an evolution of that from our perspective.
Understood. Eric, I have a question for you. Is an MSP a good place for DBAs to improve their skills in new database technologies?
Yes, it most definitely is. I can tell you the DBAs in my group, we have about 450, and when they begin working with us, they usually have kind of a certain set of skills. But over at least a year, they learn so much because they see so many different technologies and also different business industries and different setups where they're exposed to mostly any situation they probably would face after a couple of years in database industry.
Understood. Julie, we had a question come in. I'm not sure if this is something that you or Eric or maybe both might be able to help with, but the question was around courses or, resources to brush up on skills around database security and or database migration. Any thoughts on that?
So 2 great topics. Around the security, right? There are a bunch of courses out there, but I would be careful, right? And you can learn a lot about data security by just starting with what are all of the compliance regulations that you need to know, right, about your data, right? Because like I mentioned, there's different ways to look at data security. And so I would double check with your peers about the right courses, because I have seen a lot of courses out there, right? Nothing is more compelling right now than saying security and governance, right? So there are a lot of courses out there that really will teach you a lot of the tactical, like how to set certain fields and certain settings in a database for security. And that's really not what you need to know. You really need to understand that strategic thinking. How should I be thinking about security and governance across the board? How do those compliance rules impact my data? Where are we at risk versus tactical things that you could pretty much do in an online, course that you can take at your own pace. So my takeaway on security is talk to your peers, understand the compliance regulations, and find the right course. Because I do see a lot of things popping up even in my inbox every day that I think, wouldn't be the best use of my time around security. In general, as far as upping your skills and like on a migration, nothing teaches you so much as doing, right? So there's a few things that you can do to start looking at small migration projects, or if you can within your organization, I would start there if you could, right? Because you learn the ins and outs of migration by going through it, right? And being a little bit battle tested on it. So I know a lot of folks are choosing to lift and shift to the cloud because it's so much easier than migration. But if you can pinpoint within your organization some smaller projects that are moving from, let's say, from an Oracle database to Postgres, or Oracle to Snowflake, or something like that, where you can prove that there's a savings, but maybe the impact to your business won't be it's not the biggest production database you have. I would start even that way, because I think you're going to learn a lot through doing.
Understood. We have, we're going to try and get through some more questions. I know we're almost at the top here, top of the hour. So this next question, and Eric, why don't we start with you? One of our attendees was at a conference recently and believes that different fields, in the data industry are working without the knowledge of other groups and what they are doing, and it's bad for the data industry, and mainly, noticing a lack of understanding about architecture. Is that something you're coming across in discussions with customers and other people in the industry?
I would agree somewhat that, different segments of IT and database areas aren't fully aware of what maybe other groups are doing.
Julie, what are your thoughts?
I also would agree. Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I'm sorry. I also would agree, because I think traditionally with on-prem databases and sort of the old way of viewing them, you could be sort of isolated, right? Where your different database groups aren't talking to other groups, and then your BI developers are just understanding a data warehouse and really don't know the data pipeline or the data legacy coming into how that data is getting into that warehouse. I see that a lot of times too, where the architect, maybe isn't sharing all the models with the downstream consumers. There's just no patterns of communication that have been set up. And so it makes sense that, that the rate with which we're expanding in the cloud and to thinking about data as part of data pipelines and not just data silos, that the communication between the different groups is behind the curve. I think that's probably pretty typical in any kind of change environment, right? That communication is often one of the hardest things to check off your list to build those communication pipelines.
Sure. As we see data management and database management kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word merge, but as we see it interact more with DevOps, and DevOps is highly iterative and collaborative, do you think over time, it'll start to pick up on some of those qualities a bit more, and there will be a bit more collaboration, at least insofar as database management relates to DevOps and other activities that are going on adjacent to it within organizations?
I don't see how they couldn't, right? I think the data is too important. The strategic advantage of good data available to drive your business decisions is too important for these things not to evolve in that way. And so I think the companies that win are going to be the companies that are excellent with their data. And so I think, it'll be a little bit of, the folks that are still here really competing well in 10 years are ones who have solved this problem.
Understood. Well, we're over time, but I have one more question, and then I'll let everyone go. And thank you both, Eric and Julie, for staying on, as well as our attendees. We have a ton of attendees on right now. The question is, if there's one thing you would like our viewers today to walk away really keeping in mind, what would that be? And why don't we start with you, Eric?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say don't be complicit with your career. Technology is advancing significantly very quickly, and to keep your skills up to date with training and doing proof of concepts and trying to get involved in projects at your company so that you can keep your skill sets moving forward.
Fantastic advice. Julie, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would even tag onto that something, Eric, that you said originally, which is all of those things and tie yourself to your company's strategic goals, right? And those goals, if they involve cloud, then get to know cloud, right? Become an expert in those areas so that you can align your value to where the company sees that their investments are going. I think that is what every DBA should be doing right now.
I would definitely second that. Well, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our speakers today for coming on board and sharing their insights and expertise. Once again, Eric Russo, Senior Vice President of Database Services at Datavail, Scott O'Leary, Solutions Engineer at Monte Carlo, and Julie Hyman, Product Management Director at Quest. So, if you would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived, and you will receive an email from us once that archive is posted. Also, as I mentioned before, just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced on March 31st. We'll let you know if you are the lucky viewer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.